Dr. Natasha. I had to introduce you both with Doctor. I know we've gone back and forth on that, shared some laughs with that, but I'm really excited for this conversation. I say that a lot. I say that on most episodes just because I'm curious about what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about anxiety. And I was joking with some friends about I'm anxious about the conversation on anxiety. And but before we get into this, let's introduce you to our audience. Who are you? And is firing you up right now?
Oh, well, firstly, thank you for having me on the show, Tim. I'm very excited to be chatting with you. I've enjoyed all of our conversations thus far. Who am I? I'm so many things. I was actually talking with somebody yesterday, and we were talking about business and strategy and how we need to niche down. And I was like, but I do all these things. And I really, but today on the show, I'm here as a registered clinical counselor, hypnotherapist, and someone who does a lot of work with anxiety.
Hypnotherapist. I actually didn't know that about you, and I
Yeah.
should have known that. I'm like, oh, maybe like, can you hypnotize me? No, I don't know if we want to do that on the show, but that would be fascinating, wouldn't it?
Well, firstly, I can't hypnotize you. I can facilitate you to come
Okay.
into a hypnotic state. And unlike a Vegas stage show, no one's getting naked unless they want to. So,
Oh, I love
uh,
that. I love that hypnotic state. I was hypnotized once. I think I was. I don't know. It was very strange, but also it left me very curious. Maybe that's a show
mhm.
for
Another time.
another
Yeah.
state. But
Yeah.
uh, I think there's something firing you up right now because I know we talked about it before we hit the start button. Am I correct in
Oh.
saying that?
I think there's a lot of things that are firing me up. There's a couple of things. One is like sort of on this topic of anxiety, kind of understanding both the spaces of what is ours to hold, but what is being put onto us from society that drives this anxious behavior and this anxious way of being. But the other thing that's driving me right now is casting aside a lot of my social conditioning and taking a one-way trip to India. So I'm not sure if that's what you were referring to, but those are the two things that are firing me up right now.
Oh, well, yeah, I love that that one-way trip to India. I am very curious about that, and we could probably create a whole travel episode just
There we
on my
go. Another
curiosity.
time.
But we're going to talk about the root cause of anxiety,
Yeah.
and for those who are listening, this isn't just going to be like take some notes and now you have no more anxiety. Uh, but I think what we're going to get to is really understanding where anxiety comes from. I think that's where we're going to
Hmm.
go today, and uh, you know what is your definition or the definition you work with that defines anxiety?
That's a great question. I wish I had thought about that before I came on. I can already feel myself like activating a little bit, going, I really want to make sure I say the right thing in this moment, right? So I think that when we think about anxiety, for me, the way that I work with it, it's the way that our body tells us that something's not right for us. It's not in alignment, it's not working. And we need to start listening to those messages to be able to alleviate that feeling. But I think what happens is we spend so much time not listening to those messages because we're trying to fit into an understanding of what it means to be a good person or what it means to be a person in this world, that we stop listening to our own voices and we start listening to everything around us. And it's impossible to live up to those expectations all the time. And that creates that activation and that anxiety, which is, oh my gosh, like, I don't belong here. What if I do something wrong? What if this isn't the right move to make?
I just did a quick check on Google, and your definition is spot on.
Oh.
Hopefully that eases your anxiety on that.
Gosh, you mean Google says the same thing? I'm like, I don't know, maybe that's not so special anymore. And now I need to go find something else. Right. Like we just make up this stuff in our minds. I've already just created a story that's now spinning something new for myself where I could have just gone, oh, great, lovely, and then just left it. And I think that's the other thing too. We spend so much time in our minds that it does create a challenge in being able to hear the messages of ourselves and from our body as well.
Yeah, yeah, you're spot on. It's like that for me, the way I feel anxiety is my chest feels tight,
Hmm.
my posture is off. I am I can't sleep. My breath is very short, and
Yes.
the what ifs start popping into my mind. Well,
100%.
and so,
Yeah.
yeah, it was interesting. Just as I said, "Hey, you're close to Google," and it's like, "Oh, I'm not that special," and right, because those are the thoughts that automatically pop up. Is
Yes.
"Oh, you're on the Invisible Condition podcast." Well, there's hundreds of other shows on chronic illness, so I'm not that special, and this show isn't. And so,
Yeah.
it creates that state of anxiety in us, doesn't it?
I think so. And I think even just this idea that that we need to be special is also interesting as well, right? Like what is it that's driving us to want to be seen in a certain way that we don't have within us or that we're looking for? Because it's so interesting. Like we all want to be seen as special. We all want to be heard and understood for who we are as unique human beings. But that means we're all the same, doesn't it? If we're all unique, then we're actually all the same in some ways. So I think we forget that. I wonder if that's also part of what's driving the way that we feel is that we've actually stopped looking at each other as human beings and seeing each other and being present with each other and in connection and community. But I'm curious, what do you do when you start feeling that tightness in your chest and the thoughts that go running through your head?
Oh, um I just watch Netflix. I eat
Nice.
chips. I eat chips.
Uh-huh.
My daughter, the day we were recording this, we went for a walk. I went for a walk with my kids, and she said, "Dad, why did you eat so many chocolate chip cookies?"
Hmm.
And I said, "Well, sometimes when I get anxious, when I'm not feeling well, I
Hmm.
feel like I start to get depressed. I don't feel well about myself. I
Hmm.
compensate by eating chocolate chip cookies." And she
Yes.
paused and she said, "Oh, I think I'm feeling anxious, and now I need to eat some chocolate chip cookies, Dad." And
Nicely done. Well done. Passing on the
yeah,
behaviors, and we've talked about that before, right? Like how we just keep transmitting these behaviors. Like, and what's interesting is like we recognize it. Like you're seeing that it's happening, and we still make that choice to lean into the thing that is the immediate feel good, but the long term not so much.
yeah, I've worked hard at this where I would fall into states of just binge eating, binge watching,
Hmm.
and I'll give myself a bit of permission to do so.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I did so a few weeks ago before recording this, and it was about half a day. And I like baking, so that's an outlet for me. I just
Yeah.
get in the zone of following a recipe. I ate a few cinnamon buns and watched some TV. And then I said, okay, enough's enough. Time to get out.
Yes.
And I got on my
Yeah.
bike and I went for a bike ride, and I
Hmm.
just got the right energy going in my body. And I
That's
came home
amazing.
and I felt good, and I could
Yeah.
breathe,
Yes.
and it's just that reset. Because if I find if I let my brain just dwell on that negativity, I start to
Mhm.
lose hope, and then it spirals for me.
Yeah, I mean, I love this. What you've just talked about is one, we don't need to resist the feeling and the experience. The more we resist it, the more those chocolate chip cookies gain power and control, or that Netflix show. And at the same time, there is like a limit. There is a moment where we kind of need to take charge and we need to make some choices. And I do think that that's probably a like I'm all for compassion and kindness, obviously. Like I really truly believe in that. And sometimes I feel that saying no or that's enough now is actually an act of compassion and kindness. I often find that sometimes if I'm not careful, avoidance masquerades as compassion. And I'm like, oh, it's okay, it's okay. But there is that moment where we do need to take control. Now, of course, you know, there are varying levels of anxiety, depression, mental health, and illness. And so I don't want to discount and be like, oh, if you just sucked it up and tried a little harder, like that's not what I mean. There are there's these circumstances, but I think that if we can start catching these moments a little bit earlier and start changing, it changes the neuronal pathways, it changes our choice patterns, and that's so important.
Yeah, anxiety in itself is often an invisible condition, and
Yes.
as someone who lives with an invisible condition, anxiety also comes up for me.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
you know, I just kind of backtracking to what you said about just all the inputs we take in all day through social media, through friends, if you're in the school system, different groups of people, if you're in the workplace or on LinkedIn or Instagram or
Mm-hmm.
TikTok. There's so many inputs.
Mm-hmm.
And have you seen in your work just a change in how we, as this even maybe this generalization, but compare ourselves to others, seek that dopamine hit of like, oh, are
Yeah.
people checking it out?
Yes.
And
Like just
yeah,
yes. Yes, 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 yes. Right. And I think that we're too fast. I think that our life is too fast for what our biology is set up for. And most of the clients that I see right now, we are slowing down to speed up because actually we're trying to keep up with all of these things that you've just listed. And as you're listing it, I can already like feel my chest tightening a little bit, and I can just like feel the overwhelm of all the things that that sounds like. And I think that there is this aspect of slowing down and coming back to ourselves and what is important rather than getting swept along. Like all of those things that you talk about, I think encourages us to just get swept along in our lives. And then I think that's part of what anxiety is telling us. It's like, stop, like come back, come back to yourself, come back to your wholeness and to who you are. You don't need to get swept along. And so a lot of the work that we're doing right now is both at that cognitive level of what is it that I want, what is it that I desire, but also at that base level of physiology, because we're at this constant level of activation, we're actually not meeting the world in a way that has capacity. We're meeting the world already at capacity, and there's no space for things to go wrong. And so I think if we can take that step back, and so if we go back to that very, very definition of the root cause of anxiety, there is that sort of cognitive component, the thought component of it, but there's also the biology component, the physical component that taps into that feeling that we can focus on to actually change how we experience the world.
I think we're gonna like probably ping pong this back and forth of like as you're talking, I feel anxious, and then I kind of like remind myself, let's calm down. But you're
Yes.
absolutely right. We're so busy,
Mm.
and as you're talking, a previous mentor said to me once, Tim, it's time to hurry up and slow down.
Yeah, I love that.
And it's and I love that. And it's
Yeah.
something I don't, maybe I just need to put that on my monitor or somewhere in my house. It's
Hmm.
just slow down. And what do you do when you feel anxious? Like how do you feel it? Where does it show up for you? And
Yeah.
then how do you release that anxiety?
So for me, I spend a lot of time trying to do it in my mind, right? Like, so, oh, what am I feel like? I'm gonna name my feeling. What is it? What is true? Like classic CBT sort of things. And then I realized it wasn't enough. And so I really started tuning into the body a little bit more. So now I know that when I feel anxious or when I'm starting to feel like something's not right here, I can feel it in my chest tightening up, or I can feel it in my fists. I can feel it in my jaw. So I can tell you a story that about how I notice it. I was invited to I was invited to a conference. Well, it wasn't really, it was a workshop. And most of the people knew each other that was there. And I was invited, like people wanted to hear what I had to say. Like I had to remind myself that. So first, like people want to hear what you have to say. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. And that's probably my own therapy session for later that I won't bore your listeners with that. But we were in this circle and we were passing a ball back to each other. And when the person would pass the ball and then the person would say their name and something they were interested in. So I'm standing in this circle of people I don't know, and I'm watching the ball getting passed around. And all of a sudden, I'm like, I can feel that I'm not breathing as deeply anymore. And I can feel that my chest is tightening a little bit. I'm like, what is happening right now? Like, why am I not relaxed in this moment? And what I realized was that my body was having an old reaction, which is 9 years old on the baseball playground, not getting chosen to play sports because I wasn't good enough. Right. And so sometimes these old feelings come back. And to me, that feeling was there wasn't the problem, because I think healing from anxiety or healing from anything is being able to recognize when you do get activated and having a different relationship with that. And so that's where I noticed it first. I was like, oh, my body is telling me something before my mind can get online. So I have two choices. One, I can like be like, oh, I wonder why I feel this way. And I'm like, I don't really think that's going to be, I don't have that kind of time. So all I did was I took a few deep breaths. I elongated my exhale, which helps to activate your rest and digest, or that safety system. And I was able to deactivate my autonomic nervous system, because that's what's happening when you feel that tightness, is that your fight or flight system is activating because there is a perceived danger. So I was able to calm down my nervous system, because we all know that when you tell someone to calm down or nothing's wrong, you just want to slap the other person in the face, really. Like, that's kind of what you want to do.
Yeah, yeah,
And
just
you
don't do that.
can't,
Yeah.
just don't do that, like, honestly. And you can't tell someone to slow down your heart rate or your blood pressure. It's not possible. It's an involuntary response. But what is voluntary is how you use your breath. And that changes that whole physiological response. So that's always my step number one. And then in the moment, it wasn't appropriate to go, I wonder why my body is activating this way. So I was able to then like come back to it and be like, I wonder what's happening. And I was able to do it in a place of curiosity, because I wasn't in the moment anymore. I was deactivated, and I was able to do that. So that's how I deal with most of my anxious feelings, which is recognize what's happening in the body, take a few breaths to deactivate, name what's happening, and then understand what is actually real, right?
So much packed in there. As,
Yes.
as you're talking, I'm like focusing on my exhale,
Yeah.
and I'm like exhaling. Okay, is this, and also, yeah, just to go back to that, just calm down.
Yeah.
It's just not that big of a deal. It's
Yes.
just don't say that. There's
No,
there's a little bit of
honestly.
ignorance wrapped in there. But just don't say that. It's I've got
Well,
kids. It doesn't work with them, and yeah.
yeah. I mean, I think there's a difference between calm down and it's going to be okay. We will get through this together, right?
Oh,
Because
so different. I love
that's
that reframe.
yeah. Goal is the same, but the way that we talk about it can be different.
You also said something that kind of sparked a different question, another question around, if somebody says, "Hey, I'm feeling anxious right now,"
Mhm.
kind of in that thought process of, well, just don't say calm down. How do you help someone who has expressed, "Hey, I'm anxious," or "I live with anxiety," or
Mhm.
"This is setting me off right now"?
So if we were in like a therapy session versus just somebody on the street going, "Hey, I feel anxious right now that I've just met," I would handle it in two very different ways, right? So if we were in a session together, we'd kind of probably talking about, how often do you feel that way? Or what does that experience look like for you? How do you feel it in your body? What are the thought processes that are going on? So we're looking at multiple things. But if I was like randomly with a friend and they're like, "I feel anxious right now," I'd probably say to them, like, "Let's regulate together." And I'll take a few deep breaths, and they might put their hand on my shoulder, or they might just touch me if it's weird because we're in public and we don't want to be embracing in that moment. I might just like stand next to them, because we're actually co-regulating. And I think this is so important to understand, is that when we are in places of leadership, or as a parent, even, we're the regulator. I always feel like Schwarzenegger when I say that. I'm the regulator. So, but we are. We're the ones that are in charge of the moment, and we have different ways of doing that. We can use that with our language, but we can also use it in how we ground our own bodies, and how we are setting the foundation for the other one to look. It's like when you're on the airplane and there's turbulence, and you look to the flight attendant to see what they're doing. And if they're sitting down, you're like, we're in trouble. But if they're still serving drinks, you're like, okay, I think I can be fine. And you start calming down. It's exactly like that, except we're doing it with our breath, we're doing it with our body, and we're doing it with our energy.
It's such good insight for someone, as a friend, maybe
Mm.
as a caregiver, as a colleague, or even a leader in an organization. Because we in the in a previous life, doing a lot of leadership work, a
Hmm.
lot of consulting in that space, it's like the energy we bring in is the
Yes.
energy everyone else is going to feel. And if I'm feeling anxious, I know my
Hmm.
family, my kids, my wife knows, like, what's going on with you right now, what's
Yeah.
happening, and you
Yeah.
can feel it. and
Yes.
and sometimes it's like, it's okay, like, I'm just going to feel it right now,
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
just going to live in
Yeah.
this moment.
For sure.
And then it's okay, what do I need to do to bring that level down, bring my heart rate down?
Yes. And
And
remember too, oh, sorry, go
oh,
on.
no,
Yeah.
no, no, go ahead.
Well, to remember that Yes, your breath is the first. For me, the breath is always the first thing. That's the easiest access point into changing the energy. But the second piece, which I really love that you've said a few times, is I'm going to let myself feel it. Because it's when we try and resist it, it's when we try and put it down that your body goes, excuse me, I'm trying to tell you that we're in danger right now and you're not listening. So I'm just going to amp up that feeling as opposed to take a few breaths, acknowledge what's happening, and that actually will help you calm down. I think people feel afraid sometimes to acknowledge and feel the feeling because they think it will never end. But feelings ebb and flow in about 90 seconds. And so if you can allow yourself to have that feeling in about 90 seconds, maybe even less, you'll notice that there is a decline and it will pass. It's only when we start hooking in, like when we feel that sensation and then we hook in and we add meaning to it, and then we talk about it and we talk about it some more, that it actually stays for longer.
Meaning to it and the hook in.
Mm.
Can you tell us a little more about that? Like my mind is, I'm trying to think of the last time when I just like got stuck in a cranky mood or an anxious state. So I'm
Yeah.
curious about that.
Yeah. So if we like use my example at the very beginning, if I was like, oh, I'm feeling this tightness because I'm like worried that no one likes me. I'm worried that no one wants to pass the ball to me. Like I'm my 40 something year old self. Nobody wants to pass the ball to me. But if I start making story, it's actually creating more anxiety. It's creating more energy. But if I can say, oh, I'm having a feeling right now, or I'm having a sensation or an emotion right now, and I can allow myself to have the sensation without asking why, because sometimes it's not important to ask why. And I know that sounds very strange because as human beings in this world, we're like, why? If I know the why, and sometimes why is important, but sometimes it's really not. Sometimes it's enough to know that sometimes I get this way, and if I let it pass, I can then create capacity for something else. So that's what I mean by getting hooked. Like, what is the meaning that we're trying to make here? Oh, it's because they didn't like me, or because I wasn't good enough, or because did you see how they snubbed me like this? Like whatever that is. And it may have nothing to do with you, but you've created a story to this sensation, because otherwise, why am I feeling this?
I feel like I'm the world's best author at making up my own narrative.
Yes. We all are. We're taught to do that. So well done. Well
Well
done for
done.
making it in this
Yeah,
world.
yeah. Everyone
Yeah.
gets a gold star, yeah, for
Yeah.
making
Yeah.
up
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
narrative, and
Yeah.
just that just manifests into uh, often if we allow it, if we allow those hooks
Mm-hmm.
to set into a place of even more anxiety and maybe even
Mm-hmm.
into um, a different condition. Maybe it leads to depression
Yeah.
or different mental health
Absolutely.
in that space. And
Yeah.
I think when we were even planning out this episode or talking about it, we were talking even just about go back to all the inputs. And it's
Mm.
hard to shut things down. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm not here going to say, oh, okay, just time to put your phone down and snooze your notifications, because
Yes.
you're a listener. You're not going to do that. I know you're not. You might do it and then feel anxious about missing something and then re-enable your notifications. So
Uh-huh.
how can we practically hurry up and slow down? Like, how can we actually do this?
Yeah. So you're not going to like what I'm about to say, which is turn off your phone, put it down. So I think,
I love it.
so for me, it really is saying it's okay to like, yeah, I say, all right. All right, Tim, put your phone down. I see. I don't know if you're listening on this podcast. Tim currently has his phone up. If you're watching it on video, you'll see it. But I think it's creating, which is hard to do. And I think it's this process of practice of distress tolerance, right? So anxiety is also a doubt disorder. What's going to happen? What am I missing? What if I miss something? What if this happens, right? Like I better make sure everything is right because I don't want to make a mistake. I don't want to be at fault. I don't want something to go wrong. And so we're trying to create certainty in a life where there really isn't a lot of certainty. And so if we can then build a tolerance to that distress, as well as an inner knowing that life is going to happen, but what the important thing isn't whether I've dotted my T's and crossed my I's, but I have a belief and a foundational sense of trust in myself to handle it, or at least have resources around, that's a whole other ballgame. That to me is the work that we do. Distress tolerance and internal trust. These are the two pieces.
Stress tolerance and internal trust. So there you go. We'll define that in the show notes. I think we could, that's like 2 more episodes right there. Because I think it's so important, because my mind, as you were talking, was going to, well, somebody might be listening to this who lives with an invisible condition and maybe going through a diagnosis and is incredibly anxious about an
Yeah.
outcome that we don't know about,
Yeah.
or a medical appointment that we're trying to get and we can't, or a diagnosis that is
Yes.
taking forever. And
Yeah.
there's that anxiety. And so it's hard to have that internal trust when we
Totally.
have to rely on an external source in order
Mhm.
to calm that mind. And
But
yeah,
isn't that which is such a fine line? So I think the first problem is how we've been taught to trust in external sources to calm ourselves down. We've outsourced our power and our agency in many ways. But what you're talking about is legit. Like, I don't know. My doctor knows something. My radiologist knows something. I need to get this appointment because I don't know what's happening inside of me. Right. So when I think about when I'm sick, or when I've had things that we've gone through, or, my dad's been recently hospitalized, like, how do we quell that anxiety of not knowing, because we are waiting for something external? That's not outsourcing my power. That's the reality of what it is. But how am I going to choose to respond to this? Now, it's not, I don't want to be like, well, we just have to simply choose to be okay and like take a few deep breaths and we'll be fine. Like, honestly, I'm not going to say that. Like, of course we're going to feel anxiety. Of course we're going to feel worry. That's legit. The anxiety and the worry that I'm talking is about the things that we feel when you said, what if I miss something on my phone? Right? Like, we've generalized that worry to everything in our life. And we've forgotten that there are places where we can let it be.
yeah. So what I'm hearing is like, yeah, there's anxiety isn't necessarily a bad thing.
No.
It's a signal.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we process that signal?
Yes.
And it's like, I'll admit, I haven't admitted this yet. I've been putting off a test.
Mm-hmm.
I was told that my Crohn's is likely not in remission. The
Mm-hmm.
surgery solved the problem at the time. Medication's likely not working. And
Mm-hmm.
so I had to do this test, and I put it off for 2 weeks. I did it the day we're recording this, but
Yeah.
because I was anxious for the results.
Of
And
course.
it's like, well, what if they're bad? And then this morning I woke up and went, well, what if they're not?
Yes. Yeah.
And so again, it's like, it's okay to feel that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and
Absolutely.
and if we're feeling it, are you an advocate of reach out to someone or just internalize?
Oh, let me take a moment to think about that question. I feel like there's only one right answer.
Yeah, this isn't even a
Well, and
loaded
it's true.
question.
Well, and I think reaching out to someone, it was interesting. I was having a conversation with a client earlier today, and we were talking about talking with people, and I said, I would really love if we can build this space where the very first person that you want to talk to about something is yourself first, and then we reach out. Like, so how do we find, but I think what you're talking about is a little bit different. This is like truly an external situation. This isn't like I'm anxious having this conversation with Natasha or not, maybe, and which makes me feel really funny, because I'm like, it's just me. Like, why would you feel anxious about that? Which again, like, relates to this idea that we all have different experiences and how we relate to things. But of course, reaching out to someone and talking about it is important. And there is space for that to be a friend. There is space for that to be a therapist. There is space for that to be a pastor if you have a faith and there's also actually space for that to be the river and the ocean. Like, sometimes it's just about voicing what is inside, so it is no longer inside of us. Does that make sense?
Oh, I love that. So it's no longer inside of us. You're
Yeah.
not giving your anxiety a voice. You're releasing it. You're
Yes.
letting it out. And
Yeah.
I've heard of people talk about, well, I don't want to give it a voice. It's like, so I
Mm.
love that reframing of
Mm-hmm.
you're releasing it, whether it's to a
Yes.
friend. And
Yes.
I'll say, maybe choose your friends wisely on who you're sharing with, or maybe start the
Yes,
conversation with, I
totally.
just want you to listen. So
Yeah.
just don't tell me to calm down. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
just want you to listen right now.
Yeah. And that's so what you're saying is like I really just want to have that voice outside of me, right? And I think there's that difference between that inner critic where that voice gets louder and louder and louder, and you don't want to hear that voice versus the anxiety voice, which is again getting louder and louder. But by actually maybe it's for both. Like I think we should, yeah. Let's rewind a moment and go back and say, yeah, always give it a voice so that it doesn't have the internal power.
That's fantastic. And as I think about that definition of the root cause of anxiety and how we and we're generalizing.
Mhm, mhm.
How many people live with anxiety? And it was like, I don't know, 390 million people in the world live with anxiety. Like it's not
Yes.
insignificant. Um,
Yes.
it's there, and I'm hearing that it's not necessarily positive or negative. It's not bad or good. There's anxiety,
I
and
want, but I wonder if it's helpful actually to think about it differently in the sense that fear and worry and certain levels of anxiety, these are all normal. It's when it's your constant companion that it becomes something that you want to work with and you may want to change.
I'm scribbling a note down. So if there was a little awkward pause there, a
Yeah.
constant companion. I don't know why I just saw that on a T-shirt that says "My constant
Uh,
companion is anxiety." And if you see somebody with that on a shirt, you just give them a hug.
Yeah.
Maybe they need to chat. Man, that is such an interesting way to frame it. Where fear and worry, that fight, flight, or freeze
Hmm.
moment, where you're feeling your body tense up, your shallow breath. Uh, you're afraid to get picked last. But if it's your
Hmm.
constant companion, if it's your go-to feeling,
Hmm.
if you wake up every morning in that state, then if that's resonating with somebody who's listening, maybe there's opportunity there to take a deeper dive, because
Yeah.
um, it's not a great place to live, because
No.
it affects our health, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we think about heart disease and stress conditions and other physical ailments. There's so much evidence and research now that looks at how stress gets internalized as these invisible conditions that we are experiencing. And I mean, I don't know if it's as simple as if we had less stress, we would feel better, but I think there is an aspect of truth to that, which is when you slow down and when you remove some things from your life. Like I remember when I went back to grad school and my hair started falling out because I was so stressed. And then once I graduated, like my luscious locks coming back. There are these physical components to stress that actually change things. So I think, when we are working with conditions, whatever they are, we need to be looking at it at multiple levels. It's not enough to just look at something at a cognitive, at the mental level. It's not enough to look at it at the body level. We need to look at how these two things are intertwined, because our body impacts how we think, and then how we think impacts what we experience in our body as well. And then coming back to like that hypnotherapy piece, actually, there's a lot of stories that are playing like automatic playlists in the back of our mind, and these core beliefs that we have that we may not even be aware of. And that's like that subconscious mindset work and the subconscious mind work where we can start pulling things out that we didn't even know existed, but are actually driving our behaviors and driving our beliefs in ourselves.
Yeah. But when you were talking, a story just popped in my mind. Just over a year ago, my doctor said, "You need to remove all stress from your life in order to get healthy enough for surgery." And I'm like,
That's
so I looked at my wife and went, "How? Like we've got a
yeah.
mortgage. We live in one of the most expensive cities in the world. We've got two
Yes.
kids,
Yes.
and I just left my job. So like,
Yeah.
what do I do?"
Did you slap your doctor?
I asked him for a loan that I didn't have to pay back, and
Yes,
which
exactly. Yeah.
shouldn't come in. So
Yeah.
he didn't take me serious on that. But it's easy to say, right? It's easy to say
Yes,
that, oh,
100%.
we need to hurry, we need to slow down, we need to remove that stress. But I
Mhm.
think there's some practical ways to slow down.
Yes, I
Um,
think so too.
I think as we look to wind down, let's end on that. What
Okay.
are some practical takeaways? I think I already heard one. Turn your notifications off. Put your phone
Yes.
down. That gives me anxiety, but I'm gonna do it.
Yeah.
I am gonna do it.
So really, we all know what they are. And the things that I'm gonna say, I don't mean to be condescending. It's sleep, it's nutrition, it's spending time with loved ones, it's doing all those things that we feel are privileges now, but are actually the things that we need to be doing for ourselves, that should be in place. That is a huge piece of what can create safety in the body. And I think so, but if those things are hard, and I understand, like, because then there's the distress of, oh my God, like if I have to go to bed and I don't get this thing done, and then I'm going to do this and I have to get, like, I get that. Let's practice breathing. That is the easiest thing that we can do. So as we talked about before, right, you can't change the activation of your autonomic nervous system, but your breath changes that. So when we first started studying breath in the 30s and 40s, people were breathing about 6 to 10 breaths a minute. Right now, we're breathing between 15 and 20 breaths a minute. And when we're breathing that fast, like if we saw a dog panting, we'd be like, oh, it's scared. That's what we're doing. Yet we have normalized that as being okay. So if all of the other things are hard, we can at least start with changing our breath. And we start taking longer, slower breaths. And for many people, I have clients that come in who haven't been breathing well, and their breath is dysfunctional. It's actually quite scary to take a deep breath. It feels very uncomfortable because you're trying to tell your body it's safe, and your body is going, no. So, so that is the one thing I would say, that first practical piece that doesn't take any time out of your day, doesn't create so much distress, is just to practice that breath, to start deactivating your nervous system so you don't always have that cortisol and adrenaline running through your body, so that you're not always at a 7 and an 8 on a scale of 1 to 10 of anxiety. You are at least starting a little bit lower and giving you more capacity to handle what's coming your way.
I don't know what the autonomic, did I say that right? Nervous
Yeah,
system is.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yes, yeah.
maybe let's define that.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm really
Yeah,
curious about
sorry.
that.
Yeah. Sorry. I could have explained that better when we were first starting. So your autonomic nervous system it's that involuntary system. It's a survival mechanism. It evolved in the time of saber-toothed tigers, and you have your sympathetic, or your fight and flight system, and then you have your parasympathetic, which is your rest and digest. The sympathetic system, that fight or flight, was meant to be like, saber-tooth tiger, run, hide. And then rest and digest goes, whew, I'm safe now. Like, my favorite part of that system is that it diverts blood from your digestive system to other parts of your body. Because you're like, it's a saber-tooth tiger, man. You don't need to digest lunch right now. So, but then when you're in safety, it's like, okay, we can return. Our heart rate lowers, our blood vessels dilate again, our lungs are able to come back into normal positioning, right? And we take those deeper breaths. So we are living in a constant, most of us are living in an activated state, in that fight or flight state, because everything is your mortgage, your children, your wife, this thing that you had to do, like all the things that you listed off, you see as potential dangers, and it activates that saber-tooth tiger system. And so by taking those breaths, it allows us to deactivate and come into rest and digest. And so when we do that, maybe your wife and your mortgage and your kids don't seem so scary after all. I'm just kidding, obviously. My apologies to your wife in this moment. I've never met her. I'm sure she's lovely. But it gives us capacity to handle things so that we're not always so activated. It gives us capacity to be in a state of relaxation. So, and again, the other thing, maybe the other, is actually to call out consciously when you are feeling relaxed, when you're having a good time, when things feel okay, because we don't spend enough time doing that. We have negativity bias, which says, look for danger, and we're always calling that out. But we never sit back and say, oh, I feel really good right now. So if we can remember to do that, it amplifies a different part of the story as well.
Breathing, as you've been talking, I've actually been practicing my breathing and
Great.
watching and feeling it. And somebody said to me once that, hey, if your tongue is always on the roof of your mouth,
Yes.
that
Yeah,
means
yeah,
you're
yeah.
holding a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. Is that
Yes.
true?
Yeah, I mean, your jaw is tight, your tongue is at the top of your mouth, 100%. It's one of my tells, actually. I'm like, oh, release the tongue from the top of your mouth. Maybe we can do it together if we have time.
Let's do it.
Um, okay, so I'm going to get you and everybody else that's listening to just take a mental note of how you're feeling right now, just to notice any sensations in the body, to notice where your shoulders are, and to notice where your breath lands without changing anything. Like if you're breathing into your chest, into the center of your body or into your belly. Just notice those things, okay? And then together we're going to take one exhale out, and then we're going to breathe in through our nose for 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we're going to pause, and then we're going to exhale 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then pause. Okay. And then we're going to inhale again for 4, and I'm going to let you count on your own, and then you're going to pause, and then you're going to exhale for 6. If 4 and 6 feels too long, you can make it 2 and 4, whatever feels good to you. We want to start breathing in and out through our nose, but you can exhale through the mouth as well. And on the exhale, notice if you can lower your shoulders a little bit, sink a little bit heavier into the chair that you're in. If you're driving right now, please keep your eyes open. And if you're not, you can feel free to close your eyes or have a soft gaze in front of you. And then we're going to take one more breath. And then when you're finished, notice what your body feels like and what has stayed the same or what may have changed.
It's powerful. For me, I feel heavier in my chair. I feel more relaxed. I don't feel, that I carry tension in my jaw. Some nights I go to bed and I'm like, man, my jaw's sore. My shoulders are sore. My eyes are sore. And so that's something that's such a powerful and practical takeaway is leaning into that. And that saying that hurry up and slow down, you talked about that as well, is consciously being aware of our inputs and where we looking for those inputs. And if we're always looking for that next thing on social media, whether it's LinkedIn in the professional setting or Instagram or TikTok, wherever it is, or whatever it is, maybe it's an opportunity just to pause that for a day. Maybe that's a challenge. So if you're listening and you're up for that challenge or that challenge, I do it. I do it most Sundays. We've implemented a tech-free Sunday in our household because we noticed it affecting our kids, my wife and I as well. And so, we slip up most Sundays, here and there, we a little bit check the weather and things like that. But it's a conscious decision to put our phones down, put them on silent.
Beautiful.
And by the end of the day, it feels so good.
It feels good. Yeah. And set yourself up for success. If a day is too long, do 20 minutes and start there. You want to set yourself up. The world is hard enough as it is. You don't need to set yourself up for disappointment. So take small steps towards creating that space and that life that you want and just keep breathing.
I went into this conversation jokingly. It's like, oh, this conversation is making me anxious. And honestly, I was feeling anxious going into today. Not a lot of sleep, way too much coffee. My heart rate is beating faster than it should. It's just the caffeine. And maybe sprinkle a little bit of anxiety, but just such practical insights. Natasha, thank you so much for sharing that with me and with our guests. And whether you're living with an invisible condition of anxiety, or it's or you're going through a diagnosis journey, or you're diagnosed with something and you're feeling that, take a moment to pause and sit with it. Take some breaths. Reach out to someone. I've talked a lot about it on other episodes. I've talked about it on the blog as well. The importance of community, the importance of reaching out. So,
absolutely.
Where can people reach you if this is really resonating with them and they need your help? Where can people find you?
Oh, well, thanks. Well, firstly, but thank you so much for having me on your podcast, Tim. It's been a delight to speak to you. I always enjoy your insights and the things that you have to say. And if you're looking for support, you can find me at www.digdeepcounseling.com. And all of my services are on there. And you can set up a free consult to see if we might be a good fit. Or even to just breathe together for a few moments and reach out anytime.
It's fantastic. And I'll head to the website, head to wherever you're listening. Into the show notes, you'll see Dr. Natasha's link there as well. And you're a phenomenal human. Everybody needs to follow you, whether it's on Instagram, on LinkedIn, wherever it is. But we met randomly, sort of randomly, through another work engagement, and have had many awesome conversations, and I know we'll continue to have some more in
Thanks.
the future. So thanks again for coming on. And if you are
Yeah.
listening today and this resonates with you, uh, leave us a comment, connect with me on the show. If you don't have anyone in your immediate circle to connect with, head to the website, invisiblecondition.com, fill out the form there, and I'd be more than happy to connect with you.
Mm.
And as always, if this show resonates with you and you know somebody else will benefit from this, send it to them. And I'd love for other people to listen, subscribe, leave us a rating, all that good stuff. And if you have the means to donate, please do so. There's been a few generous donors already, and that just helps us keep this show going. So have a great day, a less anxious day, and I hope to talk to you soon.